My name is Robert, and we are happy to introduce you today to Mike. Mike has been a friend of mine. I met him earlier in the year, last year in 2024. And he's been a blessing to us in what we do here at Outreach 419. And he wanted to sit down today and just talk about a little bit of his story. And I am so happy to just sit down and give you the space to run through your journey from where you've been, because we've traveled some of the same paths, but you've been through it and you made it through it. And I find that inspiring. And so I'm happy to have you out today and happy that you're taking this step. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to come out and share my experience, strength, and hope. So pretty much where I started, I didn't really grow up in an abusive home. It was more, I grew up where I always felt alone.
Were you here in Michigan or?
So I grew up here in Michigan. My parents separated when I was very young.
Okay.
My father raised me. My mother, she struggles with addiction. My father, he actually passed away from alcoholism.
Okay.
So it ran on both sides.
Yeah.
But so growing up, my father did the best that he could, but I got passed around a lot. It was more passed on to my grandparents, and they did the best they could, but being the age they were snowbirds. They went out west, and so in my later years in high school, they paid my friends' families to watch me, things of that nature.
Okay.
So that's why I talk about I felt abandoned a lot. So growing up that way, I always felt alone.
It's hard to feel like you have your own space, I would think, as a kid, like your own room or your whatever.
Right. Yeah, because I was an only child and I was an only grandchild as well.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time alone. And so therefore I was always searching for something to fill that void. And so I did a lot of traveling between here and out west, because my mother, she lived out west, out in Vegas. And so I would travel out there every summer. I always remember, like I said, feeling alone. And people talk about that first drink, that sense of ease and comfort. For me, I actually remember, I can remember at such an early age to where I was at the bowling alley with my dad, literally chasing him around. I couldn't have been but maybe 4 years old. And I would throw temper tantrums if he wouldn't give me drinks of his beer, only because I liked the way that it tastes. And the carbonation, I can literally remember the carbonation in the back of my throat. That's what I liked about it at that young age. I don't know if it was the effect, but I do remember it was alcohol at that young age, and he allowed it. So fast forwarding into my adolescence, I was always the outcast or felt different, apart, like I didn't fit in.
Sure.
I played sports with all my friends, but I wasn't in the popular group.
Okay.
I wasn't good enough in sports to be the jock.
Sure.
And I didn't want to hang out with the bad group. So I was just in between. I hung out with everybody. So I became more of like a chameleon.
Yeah.
And I fit in with anybody, but that's also where I felt I spent a lot of time alone, because I didn't fit in. So that's where I really started looking for, I started smoking weed when I was like 12, and that progressed pretty quickly, and my father knew about it because he would joke about it. saying that he knew that me and my friends were getting high and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But fast forward through that, I started drinking really heavily later on in high school to the point where I was getting drunk before school. And that's when it really started going downhill. Grades slipped. I didn't care about sports anymore. Alcohol and drugs became,
That's your sport. Yeah.
that was my focus. That's where I wanted to be. It didn't take very long, and I had dropped out of school my sophomore year. And then that lasted for a few months.
Did you feel like your dad, by him not disciplining or telling you to stop or saying, hey, that's not acceptable, did that kind of give you like license, like, hey, I guess this is okay?
And see, that's the way that it was when it was with my dad. He wasn't the father that disciplined at all. If he got upset with me, like, he just didn't talk to me, which that even made it worse for me as far as being more abandoned.
Because now you're trying to interpret what's going on.
So, yeah. So I dropped out of school, and then I remember I made the decision, like, so I was trying to figure out at that time, what am I going to do with my life? Because I'm not going to college academically or with sports.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do with my life? And I decided to go into the military. And that was when I was 17. That's where I decided to go. But in order to do that, I had to obviously finish with high school. So I signed up when I was 17. I went back I moved in with my grandparents and went to alternative ed and basically got my high school diploma really quickly. Did my basic AIT, all that stuff. That transition, that made me grow up pretty quickly. And I came back, I guess it fed my ego a lot.
Sure. What was your relationship with alcohol like during AIT and after you graduated?
During AIT, I can actually remember it wasn't my idea to do it, but I wouldn't say it was because I wasn't that smart. I just didn't think about it. But I participated in it once I saw somebody else doing it, and I think I was talking to Heidi about it the other day. I saw somebody drinking aftershave, and yeah, I remember getting drunk on an aftershave once in AIT. That happened. Wouldn't ever recommend.
I can't even imagine how the burp tastes from that.
Fresh. Yeah, but so to fast forward through that, I ended up on active duty and I was training for deployment. So when I was in the Army, I went in 2001. I graduated basic training 2 weeks before 9/11.
Okay.
And once I made it to Fort Bragg, we were going to be, like my company and everybody else, we were going to be the first wave to go overseas.
Okay.
And I actually got injured. I blew my knee out training for deployment. And that's where everything really spiraled down because a couple of my buddies didn't come back, and I blamed myself for that for a long time. And a lot of people said, well, there's a reason why you didn't go over. But in my head, I was like, if I would have been there, then maybe it wouldn't have happened, type deal.
People that don't understand the cohesiveness of a military unit or
Right. So I fought, that's where a lot of my depression and everything came from. Now, that's when I had my first knee surgery. Now I'm being fed Percocets, and then I start drinking on top of it. I'm mixing both,
Yep.
and I can't go to the motor pool. I can't do what I signed up to do. So I start acting out. Basically, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I kept getting wrote up. Make a long story short.
Yeah.
And they ended up putting me out for patterns of misconduct is what it was. I fought with that for years. Like right after I got out, that's when about a year after I got out, that's when I dove into methamphetamine.
Okay.
So if I rewind the tape, when I was 15, on one of the trips that I went to go and visit my mother,
Yep.
she was actually the first person to ever introduce me to methamphetamine.
Okay.
And I only did it that one time, but that kind of opened the gate
Sure.
for later on in life,
Yep.
because that was my niche. I didn't want weed or any of that anymore. That's where I went after the military, and I very quickly ended up on the streets, homeless, out in Arizona, and that lasted for about 9 months. And family didn't know where I was. Nobody did. They didn't know if I was dead, alive, and all of a sudden I just popped back up. When I finally said I had enough, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And I asked for help. Luckily, my uncle was in AA in Vegas, and that's where I went. He got me into sober living. That was the very first time that I got sober.
Sure.
That lasted a year and a half, but I only did it. I still had reservations.
About getting sober?
Right.
Okay.
Like I still had reservations, meaning the only thing I really wanted was I didn't want to be homeless anymore. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to have my life back. I didn't really want to get sober.
Yeah.
That's not what I was after. I wanted my life back. And that's what I got.
Sure.
By getting sober and working the program, that's what I got. I got my life back. But once I got my life back, I didn't need the program anymore. And I stopped working the program.
Yeah.
My dad fell on hard times, and I ended up moving back up here. It didn't take much longer after that, and that was my first relapse. And that first relapse, I was out for a few years.
Okay.
And it was only drinking for a long while. And then it got into some pills, Oxycontin, things of that nature. But eventually, I moved back out west, and it was right back to methamphetamine. And it wasn't that long, and I was homeless on the streets in Las Vegas, and right back where I was
Yeah.
prior.
It doesn't take long. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was the same as before. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and then I asked for help again. This time I got sober. It lasted 2 years,
Okay.
and
During that period of sobriety, were you working a program at
Yes.
all? Like sponsor
Yep.
or okay?
so every time that I've gotten sober
Yep.
was always in AA.
Okay.
And I always followed the program as suggested. And I think that's why I was able to get long periods of sobriety like that,
Sure.
because I was always working a solid program. I always got the sponsor,
Yep.
did what was suggested, but again,
Did you have it in the back of your head? I'm probably going to use again one day. Or at some
it
point were you
wasn't-
convinced I'm doing this sober thing?
it wasn't reservations like I'm gonna drink again or I'm gonna use again.
Sure.
It was more so just that I just wanted my life back.
Yeah.
Really.
Yep.
And then once once I got that back, then I started taking credit for everything that my higher power and everything that the
I
program,
Yeah.
all the gifts
Yeah.
that I was given.
Yeah.
I started taking credit for all of those. And it doesn't take very long
No.
before you relapse.
Yeah.
Me anyways. Now, after those 2 years, obviously, I went back out, had to test the waters again.
What were the circumstances leading up to that relapse?
That one, I had actually just found out. That's when my son's mother was pregnant, and I ended up going back out. And during that relapse, I ended up out in LA.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I can remember the reason. I just followed 2 other people. We hopped on a bus and went to LA. I didn't know that we were going to be living in a park, but that's what ended up happening. We ended up living in MacArthur Park, downtown LA, and then I ended up bouncing between MacArthur Park and Skid Row for about, I want to say about 8 months, somewhere right around there. And
It's no joke on Skid Row.
oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, I've been to some very scary places,
Yeah.
and that place at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
is
I've seen
no,
some video, and I don't
no
even know
joke.
how do you go to sleep there?
you don't
Yeah, I know.
you don't like
'cause
you literally
you go to
hear
sleep,
people,
you get robbed or stabbed or
yeah, like you hear people screaming,
yeah,
like you'll hear grown men screaming at 3 a.m. like
yeah. Blood curdling.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very scary. And so I did that for about 7-8 months. And so they have what's called street cleanup out there, where they have crews that come through and clean up the homeless areas
Yeah.
because they can't just let you live in the filth.
Yeah.
And they can't put you in jail or whatever. They just make you pack up and move. There was one officer that worked for the LAPD that I ran into on 3 occasions, one right after the other. Her name was Officer Hugh, and she actually treated me with compassion versus judgmental.
Yeah.
And she took the time to actually talk to me and get to know me. Once she found out that I was a veteran, she was like, "What are you doing out here?" She was like, "If you really want help, I can get you help and I can get you off the street right now." I played with that idea, but I wasn't quite ready yet.
Sure.
And she was like, after that 3rd time, she was like, "If you want help," she said, "meet me at the Rampart Police Station at 8 a.m. Monday morning."
Yeah.
7:30 Monday morning came around, and I'm in my tent in MacArthur Park, and there's a couple other people there, and I'm like, "You guys watch my stuff. I'll be right back." I have to go, and my intention, I was only going to go and get information on what she had.
Yeah.
And then I was going to come back and continue doing what I was doing. So I went to the police station, talked to her, and then there was he was like a drill sergeant, another officer there.
Sure.
And it was called like the RIT team. And this other officer, basically, he wasn't so compassionate. He basically told me, he said, "If you don't take the help that she's giving you right now and take the help that everybody else that is here right now," he said, "next time I see you," he said, "I will make something up if I have to. You will go to jail." And I was like, okay. So that started me on my next period of sobriety. I got into the Homeless Veteran Center in Hollywood, and that period of sobriety lasted me 3 years. And so my son was born in August of 2016. I got sober October of 2016. So he was 2 months. I always thought it was funny, and I always joked about it. He's 2 months more sober than I am. So, yeah, those 3 years, those were, up to that point, like, those were the best 3 years of recovery that I had. Like, I was so strong into recovery. I was sponsoring guys. Like, I was really strong into recovery. And so this is what's really scary about the addiction is if you diagnose me with any other disease, any other terminal disease, I'm gonna seek treatment.
Sure.
And I will do whatever I need to do to not die.
Yeah.
But you diagnose me with alcoholism or like drug addiction,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna need a drink or a sack to try and figure out what's wrong with me or how to get through it.
Yeah.
And it's my voice that convinces me. If it was somebody else, it would be easy for me to tell you to shut up.
Sure.
If you were telling me, hey, let's go.
Yeah, let's go score some dough. Yeah. Yeah.
It would be
You'd like,
easy
"What?"
for me, yeah. I'd be like, but if it's my own voice in my own head,
Yeah.
oh, it'll be different this time. And it's that lie
Yeah.
that I tell myself every single time.
Sure.
And I would convince myself, and that's where usually it would always start, whether it be a drink, or I even found that just hanging out in certain spots. I hang out in those spots long enough,
Yeah.
eventually I'm going to convince myself one hit ain't going to hurt. And it might not that first time.
Sure.
I might get away with it that first time. But if I get away with it that first time, then that lie gets a little bit bigger.
For sure.
And I'll be like, I got control of this.
Yeah.
And then I lie to myself a little bit more, and I'm off and running again. And eventually,
Complacency is a slippery slope.
eventually I'm right back
Yeah.
on the streets, shooting dope,
Yeah.
doing the same thing in the same place. When I was sober for those 3 years with my son, everything was great, but again, it was the same thing. I slowly backed away from the program. I stopped calling my sponsor. I stopped working the program, and I made my son my higher power. I made his mom and him like they were the only thing that were keeping me sober. That was my focus. And then my father passed away from alcoholism. And I came up here to deal with that, and they came up here as well. And shortly after his funeral, he had a sister, my aunt. She actually died 2 weeks after he did. So me being the only child and grandchild on my dad's side of the family, that left me now the only person left from that family. They both died. And now I'm up here dealing with all of that. I inherited the house, all that stuff. I have to try and figure out what I'm doing with all of that.
Yeah.
I don't have my support system. I don't have the program. I don't have none of that. I put my son and his mom on the plane to go back out to Vegas. And I can remember I kissed my son, put him on the plane, and I was like, I'll see you soon. And without even thinking, as soon as I left the airport, I called a good friend of mine that I hadn't seen in years up here. And because I didn't have nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I went over to go hang out with him. I didn't know that he was selling dope, but he was selling dope. And so I didn't have any intention. That's not what I intended on doing, but I put myself in that situation.
Yeah.
I found myself in that situation without any program, without a support system, and with everything else going on. And it's just like they say in the big book. Now I'm beating on the bar again, asking myself, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And now I'm full of shame, remorse, guilt, everything. And that kept me out for a long time, because I walked away from my son. I walked away from all of that, because now my addiction really took hold, stronger than it ever had before. Because it even talks about it in the Bible, how, and I think Heidi actually was talking about this in last week's service, when the son inherited his inheritance and he squandered.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. Was I inherited my inheritance.
Yeah.
And I literally went to the walls, like everything.
I see some prodigal son parallels.
Like literally everything. So that added to that shame and guilt
Yeah.
and remorse, because so by the time everything was said and done, because I burnt through all the money, the house, all the family heirlooms, I literally lost everything except the clothes on my back.
Yeah.
And that includes my father's ashes. They were in one of the storage units that I lost because I was too busy paying attention to other stuff
Yeah.
and just didn't pay on a storage unit, and it got auctioned off.
Yeah. I guarantee your dad has forgiven you for that.
So all of that guilt and shame kept me out for a really long time. And like I was out for 4 years
Yeah.
in that relapse. And I spent a lot of time in isolation, just using just myself and my dog. We traveled a lot of places, just going to like Iowa, all sorts of different places, like I said, but I got really lonely. And that's where I can remember I really saw the powerlessness in my addiction. I had admitted I was powerless before, every time that I had gotten sober before, but this is where I really, really witnessed how powerless I was. Because I remember multiple times, literally blood just running down my arms. And I would pray. I would literally pray to God just to let me hit one more time and I'd be done.
Yeah.
Let me get high one more time and I'll be done. I promise. And sure enough, I'd get high and then I'd be at it for the next 3-4 days. And somewhere along the line, I'd be right back in that same situation again.
Yeah.
Over and over. It just kept repeating.
I got you on the next one, God. Yeah.
And so I witnessed just how powerless I was. I couldn't stop. There was absolutely no way that I could stop on my own.
Yeah.
Because even though I was praying that I would stop, even with those prayers, at the same time I had the thought in my head, I'm like, I can't stop. I'm not going to stop. So that's when I started. My only way out, the only way that I saw a way out, was suicide. And my birthday was coming up. And I made the decision, if I spend another birthday by myself, then my birthday is the day that I go. And I remember sending out quite a few very, what's the word I'm looking for? I was really looking for, basically, I was offering people money, drugs, anything just to come and hang out with me on my birthday. So the day before my birthday, I went and checked in to the hotel.
Yeah.
Very methodically. I went and dropped off my dog, and I picked up my gun, picked up all my drugs.
Yeah.
I had one other person with me that was helping me try and find somebody to go hang out with me at the hotel,
Sure.
and didn't have any luck. But I kept explaining, look, I have a taillight out, can't be driving after dark. It ended up being like 11:30 at night, I think was about the time it was.
That's what happens on tweaker time, right? It's,
And
Yeah.
on my way to go and drop this person off, on my way to the hotel, because by this time I made up my mind. I'm like, by myself,
yeah.
I knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I was going to go there, I was going to get as high as I could, and that was going to be the last time anybody saw me. And pretty much right after I left that house, I got pulled over for a taillight. Cop didn't even have to say anything. As soon as he came up to my window, I already knew that was God's,
Yeah.
that was his divine intervention in my life. Again, because it had already happened when I was in LA.
Yep.
It had already happened multiple times in my life. And here he was again. Recognizing this, I immediately told the cop, like, I wasn't messing around with him. I was like, I have felony warrants, I have drugs and a gun in the back. And the look on his face, he was like, I'm gonna have to ask you to step out of the vehicle.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, let's go.
Thank you for being honest, but
Right.
yeah.
That was the beginning of, that was my first surrender of this recovery.
Sure.
When I say first surrender, that was me saying I'm done. But I really learned what surrender was when I was in jail. Because once I got in, I really dove into recovery
Yeah.
because I knew that's what I needed.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to save my life. I got a hold of my uncle. He sent me a big book, and I got a hold of the Bible. Those were the only books that I had. And I started reading them, but I wasn't fully focused. I was still joking around with the guys, playing games, doing this, doing that. And for quite a long time when I was out, I suffered from a inguinal hernia that I never got taken care of.
Yeah.
It was pretty big. And once I got moved to the back in jail, one day it got strangulated. And I feel that was another wake-up call. He was like, look, you need to, this is even more of a timeout.
Yeah.
So I was rushed out for emergency surgery and had my surgery. That put me into isolation in the county jail because I couldn't be around anybody else
Yeah.
because they'd be liable if I got hurt. That put me in the front in booking where I had no access to TV, no access to radio. I was in a one-man cell all by myself.
Lights are on all the time.
Yep.
I've been there.
Because I was under observation.
Yeah.
It was the observation cell. And
Paper suit, or were you wearing actual? You had a jumpsuit.
I had my jumpsuit.
Okay. All right.
And I had my big book and my Bible.
Okay.
So once I got in there and I had that, once I was in there long enough, I started really realizing like maybe I was put in here for a reason.
No
So-
distractions there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where I really dove into the book.
Yeah.
And I read the book a couple times
Sure.
in there, really dove into the Bible. The story that I really related to in there was when he was in the whale, how God basically took him and put him where he needed to be and gave him that time out. So I was in there for 27 days.
Okay. It's a long time to be in booking with the lights on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Do you have a bed in there, or was it a mat?
it was the concrete slab.
Concrete slab, yeah.
Yep. Concrete slab and a mat.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I got moved back to the gym where I spent the next month. I got really lucky when it came to my case. It was the first time that I ever got in trouble. And make a long story short, they really took it easy on me. I only ended up getting time served and 2 years probation. I also had another case that I ran concurrent with that I got the same thing on, when they really could have put it to me and I could have served multiple years. And it's only God's grace that it played out the way that it did. Now, since I got out, I've done everything according to the book. I'm a big 12-stepper. So I got my sponsor and was going to meetings up in Lansing for about a year before I moved to Carson City. That's where I started going to the MAC. That's when I met you.
Yeah.
And started coming to Outreach 419. But the only thing that I can really say is the only thing that I really know to do different from any of the other times, the only thing that I am doing different now is living in a constant state of surrender, working, staying plugged in,
Yeah.
continuing to work a program, because without my higher power and without program first, everything else is going to fall apart,
Yeah.
because I've proven that to myself every single time and time again. My life today, I mean, it's not some huge extravagant life, but it's a life that I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine being where I am today
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Certain
Two and a
guys.
half years ago, yeah. A year, even a year and a half ago, in my sobriety, I was isolated, living in a basement, going to meetings and working on myself. But at that time, I was praying for God's will for me, praying for, I guess, what I want out of life,
Okay.
but more so praying that my will and God's will line up.
Sure. That's a big
This-
prayer.
Yeah. And this is where where my life really gets full, is growing up alone and abandoned and all the time. I never really had that family. And then prior to this last relapse, my dad and my aunt passed, so I'm the only one left of my family. I have no family left.
Yeah.
that was like the biggest, probably the biggest part of my prayer as far as my will and God's will, is that I just wanted him to put my ideal person in my life and the family that he wants for me to have.
Yeah.
And through just by, and like I said, I was in a basement by myself a year and a half ago. And just by continuing to do the next right thing,
Yeah.
going to meetings, that's all I was doing. I just kept going to meetings, talking to people, introducing myself to people.
Sure.
And that's where I met you. And then I got baptized and out at Cowboy Church.
Now, he didn't just get baptized. We were outside at a fairgrounds and he got baptized in a horse trough. If you're going to go, you might as well go big, right?
Right, right. But today I actually have family. I actually met somebody in the program, and her daughter and her son.
Yep.
I couldn't imagine, like, it's just all come together. And not only that, but it's her entire family has accepted me, and they know about my past.
Sure. The not so good parts.
Oh, they know everything.
Yeah.
Like I don't hide anything.
Yeah.
They don't hold that stigma, and they've accepted that, and I couldn't ask for anything better.
It's beautiful when you find that peace, right? And it sounds like to me, just from earlier, in life, that isolation, that feeling alone, I'm feeling abandoned almost. Now with family, and not just family, but community, right? Like you have your recovery community, you're very intentional with your time and what you choose to plug into, but it's always community and people. And I think that's a puzzle piece in your life that...
Absolutely. And so and the other thing that I would really want to touch on is that kind of helps me stay focused is the service work and giving back.
Sure.
Because I remember when I was out in LA and there were groups that would come out with hot meals.
Yep.
And they would just literally take their own personal time
Sure.
to come out and talk to individuals and wouldn't try to coerce them into religion or anything. They just wanted to talk to you and show you that compassion. And that really stuck with me.
It's amazing what treating somebody like a human will do.
And by that sticking with me, that's something that I carried with me throughout my recovery, throughout the years. And I always did it on my own from time to time. Just, I would go out and hand out stuff, but I always handed out socks. That was one of my big things because I remembered I could never keep a clean pair of socks when I was out there.
Yeah.
And so I know how important that is. And it was always a dream of mine to one day maybe have it become something.
Sure.
Something like what I saw out in LA. And after meeting you and Heidi, just by openly communicating with you, you guys have made that dream become a reality.
Oh, you're making it. We're just encouraging you along the way and helping out where we can. So
yeah, Ashley and her daughter, they're a very big part of that.
Yeah.
Without them, I don't think I'd be doing any of it really.
Yeah, it's
But
beautiful.
yeah.
It keeps you grounded. It keeps you involved, and it puts your 12th step into practice.
Absolutely. And the thing that going out and doing that, getting that one-on-one time with those individuals,
Sure.
doesn't only, yes, it's helping them,
Sure.
but at the same time, it's giving me that I'm remembering what it was like.
Yeah.
I'm getting those visuals.
Yeah.
I'm getting those flashes or whatever.
This is how close I am going.
Like-
If I go back, this is what happens.
Absolutely. Like, I've come across a few people already where I approached their tent and I saw right inside their tent, and I'm like, it took me right back immediately. I'm like, I saw the egg crate. I saw just the very few little items that I saw on the inside. I'm like,
Yep.
I remember living just like that.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely nowhere where I want to be back
Yeah.
to. But that's not why I do it.
Sure.
But yeah, I just really hope and pray that we get enough people involved and the word gets spread and this thing really blossoms into what I envision. Because eventually I'd like to have a bus
Sure.
to where we have
Yep.
a community of people that go out and do this.
Yep. Have all your supplies on the back of the bus. You can get your bags ready.
Yeah.
Take out a few seats. Got a little workstation back there.
But it's all in his time.
Sure.
And whatever his will is. Yeah, that's my story.
If you were to look back, what's a lesson that you would say, what's a lesson that you've learned that if somebody's just starting out, maybe somebody's in the midst of just going through it right now, and they're watching this, somehow they came across this silly video watching two dudes talk about life. What would you say to that person today?
In the midst of going through,
In the midst of going through addiction, in the midst of going through just life is a mess. Nothing's fitting. They don't.
so one thing that really, and this was told to me by my uncle the very first time that I got sober. And his words to me were, and I've actually heard many other people say it in the recovery program, if you really want your life to change, give it a try.
Yeah.
You literally have absolutely nothing to lose. If you give it a try, I guarantee you within 30, 60 days, if you really give it a full effort, if you don't see a drastic change in your life,
Yeah.
you can go back to smoking dope.
Sure.
You can go back to drinking. You can go back to
Yep.
living the way that you were living.
It's waiting for you.
So,
Yep.
because,
Yeah.
and the other thing, I was actually talking to my sponsee about this the other day too, is that usually it's that amount of time to where if somebody actually comes in and puts forth the effort,
Yeah.
that will ruin their drinking and using for the rest of their life.
Sure.
Because if they're coming in,
Yep.
obviously they think they have a problem.
Sure. Or somebody in their life has told them you've got a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So from that point on, if they do go back out and use or
Sure.
drink,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, that thought will always be in the back of their head of, I probably shouldn't, why am I doing this? I don't think I should be doing this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's why, little
Yeah.
Jedi
Yeah.
mind trick.
Yep. Yep. I love it. I love it. And I'm proud of you for where you're at today. I think this is the beginning in a lot of ways of your story. I think that you've got a good foundation from things that you've learned along the way. But I think how you're plugging in now and how there's other pieces of your life that are feeling more complete. I think your journey is just beginning. And I'm honored to be a part of it. And I'm here to support in whatever way we can. So we love you.
Love you too.
Yeah. Friends, if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about, hey, maybe this sober thing might be for me, maybe it's not, who knows? Maybe somebody in your life is saying this sober thing should be for you. Give it a try. Really, like Mike said, what do you have to lose? The bottle will still be there, the dope will still be there. But what if your life could look different? What if? What if your life doesn't have to look the way that it does right now? So I encourage you today, just think about that and think about what that first step might look like. And reach out, because community is really where it's at. Addiction loves isolation. And one of the keys to that, to breaking that, is getting out of your comfort zone and reaching out in community. And if you're in the Michigan area, in Greenville area, Outreach 419 is always here, but there are agencies and organizations all over the place that are here to support and meet you where you're at on your journey. So wherever you're at, I wish you the best. And Mike, it's been a pleasure, and look forward to doing this again.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.